So when we resist, we don't have to resist in a way where we are all melancholy and sad. Because especially those of us from the majority that are not speaking out of a sense of guilt of things that we did or our ancestors did. That's not really where we don't have to apply guilt that we don't have to attract. What we can do is reach back into the part of us that says, in spite of what it feels like, in spite of what I'm dealing with, I still have joy. This joy that I have, the world can't give me, the world can't take it away.
Malcolm, Phil, I really appreciate, or should I say Mousy Baby? Is that what you just said? Yeah. I really appreciate you guys coming on here and talking. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, John.
Thank you for having us, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that are new to Common Hymnal, I'm curious, maybe Malcolm, you can kind of speak into this a little bit, but can you kind of share a little bit about how the collective started and what the name Common Hymnal means to you?
The story is a very long story. I've tried for 40 years to shorten it because it's a 40-year-old story. But essentially, the project, I'm the instigator. I don't think I'm like the leader. It's become an egalitarian culture of which I'm a vital participant. But 40 odd years ago, as a young white South African, I came to terms with the egregiousness of legislated racism and began a journey. As a kid who didn't grow up in church, who became a Christian in what was exclusively white Christianity, and then in Pentecostalism, where people always love to have prophetic words about people's elbows and knee conditions. I never had those. I just had my intuitions were about the destiny of our country. And so 1985, I led my young church, of which I was a co-leader, on a 21-day fast to pray for our country. And we wrote songs in preparation for that as young white people that were dealing with apartheid. We actually put the word apartheid in the songs, which got me into trouble with all my white friends. And so on the 14th day of a 21-day fast, it hit me that we should do something with these songs that we wrote for our church. And that sent me on a 40-year journey. On the 21st day, I was reading the book of Isaiah when I was late to go to the gathering, and I read 49 verse 6. It's too small a thing for you to restore the lost of the house of Israel, but I've called you to be a light to the nations. And I read that verse to my 350 people in my community on that Sunday night. And I said, just as it was uneconomical for Jesus to come to Israel alone, but God's truth is for everybody, so is with everything. We've now got a love for our country. God loves the countries, plural. And I said, I believe that in 1990, our countries, this is me in my intuitive Pentecostal youth, which I overdosed on by the time I was 28, but it's still my story and I can't avoid it.
Right.
I said to my church, Nelson, and I didn't say Nelson Mandela would release. I said, our country will change in 1990. And I know I'm supposed to move to America. I'm going to live in America when three things will be true. It will be more dangerous to live in America than South Africa. America will face its racism head on, and it will be in a time of international crisis. I forgot about that, proceeded to get involved in our movement, and had 5 really interesting years as a justice advocate in the musical dimension of our march to freedom. But on the 1st of January 1990, I woke up really early and realized, oh, I got to go to America. Long story short, I found my way here, and I always thought that my role was to be an older person helping a younger generation doing something. And for 20 years, I roamed the streets of America. I never found a 24-year-old like I was who had the fire to do something like this. And when Ferguson erupted and Michael Brown was murdered, I was in a conversation with a black friend, and I told the story of just a longer version of the story I've just told you. And as I said, I'll live in America when it's more dangerous to live in America than South Africa. I just saw his eyes go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we're watching TV every night. And it's like, oh, and then I had to make a decision that week. Do I carry on looking for the youngster, or do I actually start the journey? And I started a journey to do what I'd done in my 20s, which was gather songwriters to write songs that dealt with the issues at hand, that were real, that were justice infused, that were not because we I came from a version of white Christianity that escaped the tragedy of our country, and so we started writing songs that dealt with realness. And so this project has been that I've worked as a consultant in music for my entire life, and for my 30 years that I've lived in America, and I've touched the Christian space, and it's 100% escapist,
Hmm.
because that's where the reward is. But so I started the slow journey of building something. So I said from day one, we're not a collective. We call ourselves a hymnal because we wanted to be a collection of songs. If we were a ministry or a parachurch or any of those ideas, then someone had to be the leader, someone had to be the pastor. We had all these things to take care of. We try to say, let's write songs. Now the net the byproduct is relationship, community, a lot of people that love each other, and something very, very healthy. But that's how we started. We called our little company Common Exchange simply because it was the name of my favorite pub in the town of Cobham, England, which had nothing to do with nothing, and maybe I shouldn't have said
Oh, I love it.
that.
I also love that I don't know if if I knew that ahead of time, but I love that idea of uh, instead of collective, it's a hymnal. It's this collection of I love the poetry behind that. I love that signal of what it like from the top down, from the very I mean, just from even just what you call it, this idea of what you all have together. I love that idea. Yeah.
There's a fastidious commitment to lyrical integrity and quality as opposed to just slapdash opportunism.
Mm. Slapdash opportunism. That, yeah, I don't want to I could go off on a tangent on that one. That's a rabbit trail we could chase. But Philip, I wanted to ask you because one of the things that I read kind of like getting ready for this, kind of diving into your stories and stuff. You have this quote of saying that you had never felt so wanted as a creative after joining kind of a writing camp that Common Hymnal did. And I'm curious, what was it about that community that made you feel that way, that kind of communicated that to you, especially from the get-go?
Yeah. So I came into Common Hymnal over time. I was introduced to Common Hymnal through my brother Brandon Hampton, who was a early part of the early phases of Common Hymnal for sure, integral to the DNA. And he came through United Pursuit, if you're familiar with Will Reagan and United Pursuit, and has also played with a lot of other people. And so anyway, Brandon lived in Knoxville at the time, where I live currently in Knoxville, Tennessee. We got to know each other over the course of a year or so. And in that time, he said, I want to introduce you to Malcolm. And so me and Malcolm and Brandon and our friend Brittany, and we just sat down and got a chance to sit down and introduce ourselves. And I got to hear kind of the ethos of what Common Hymnal was about. And at that time, I was working for my church, which was an intentional, multi-ethnic, multi-generational church with an actual Black pastor. That's important to qualify when we talk about these things. Uh, in the South, designed to be able to reach across lines and things like that. So I was very deep in the world of church ministry because that's what I was doing at the time. But in my heart of hearts, that is not the only space I am really able to occupy. I'm also an artist. I've been an artist before I was a church leader as well. And so when I came into Common Hymnal, I was 10 years, going on to 10 years of writing my own songs, creating my own music, producing content and things like that. And I had done the vast majority of it, as far as the direction of what I did, was self-directed, all alone. I had many, many people come and help me to do things. I had many people give me connections to studios, and somebody shot a mini doc for me and many things like that. But as far as what I did as a creative, I did it alone. I did it. I made my songs alone. I wrote my music alone. I figured out my performances alone. All of that stuff was alone. And so I came to Common Hymnal in a writing camp that happened in LA in June of 2019, and flew on the plane with Brandon, Brittany, and Malcolm. And we got there, and I start meeting all these people. And I'm in the room and I'm going, everybody in this room is better than me, right? That was my first instinct. Was like, gosh, everybody here is better than me. Everybody's been doing something, which was great because I had been in a lone space again for so long of doing everything myself. And so that weekend, that half week going into the weekend was just, it was really life altering for me in this sense that it was the first time I really did like group writing for real. I had done one co-write before, but I came from the world of hip hop. And so even though
Mm.
I lead worship and I sing and I write other songs, and I've leaned in much more into that stuff now through Common Hymnal, at the time, all of my produced music and my self-focused music was all rap. And in rap, you don't write with other people. So there was no, oh, what idea do you have that? No, I always keep it in my head and then I put it on the mic. And so I'm in a space now for the first time where I'm getting the chance to give an idea out that may be shot down, but it won't be shot down in like hate or in frustration or whatever. It's shot down in love and hey, let's grow this. And that continued experience of that, the theological diversity of Common Hymnal, which was a challenge for me as a standard issue kind of orthodoxy guy. It was challenging for me to meet so many people with different belief systems that were all still believers in Jesus. But that challenge was still welcomed in the context of community, right? So that's another life altering aspect of it. And then just being welcomed to be myself and sing songs I wrote and see people appreciate that gift and to be brought in. My man Gilbert, he told me like when I was saying, man, this is so cool being a part of what you all are doing in LA. And Gilbert goes, not us. You in here too. And I was like, oh, I'm in this. Like I'm in it, you know. And so I always introduce myself to people now as a cousin in the Common Hymnal family. That's what I say. I'm a cousin in the family. It's just what we do. And when I came home and tried to describe to my wife what that weekend was, I just burst out crying for
Mm.
like a good little hard cry. I didn't see it coming, but that's what it was. That's the short condensed version of multiple weeks in a year of relationship. But it was
Wow.
being welcomed into a space where I was free to make
Mm.
mistakes. I was free to create in process. I was free to not have to have all my ideas ready and ready to be perfect right then. And I was free to blunder, you know, through many conversation. And yet I was welcomed as part of the family. As an artist, people don't understand how life-changing that can be. That's really where that came from. And it's continued. That hasn't changed since
Mm.
2019. It's never changed.
I love that. You know, I'm not an artist at all. I mean, well, I guess maybe in the written word,
Sure.
I take that very seriously. But as far as like musically, I couldn't. You don't want to hear me sing. But man, what you just said really resonates with me because, you know, that you both have talked about this idea of a journey, and you start that journey and you lose all the things that came before it, including relationships and belonging and community. And
Yes.
then when you find a place like Philip, like you just described that weekend, you know, when you find a place that gives you that freedom and breathes that life back into you, how just literally life altering it is. And you saying that brings up like that. I can remember a moment like that for us. And it was just, it almost felt like we describe it as it felt like, you know, it felt like we just came home.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Yes. As an artist, you feel often like you have been building into something and you don't know where it's building to, or you feel like so many, especially because we are all influenced by capitalism, because it's the water that we swim in. We're all told that if you are not famous, if you are not rich, if you don't have millions of views all the time, then you're essentially a failure. And everybody is chasing this carrot, this dangling carrot of fame and accolade and being known. And even if you believe in Jesus as an artist, you are still swimming in that water. And I know there was many a season where I felt like, why did I learn how to write songs? Why did I learn how to make music? Why did I learn? What was the point? And I'm only doing this by myself. And coming into a space where you are no longer by yourself, and the community is designed to build everyone up. From the beginning, that's always been how it is. That is the game changer because it's no longer can I just make it? Can I just blow up? It's can we succeed in a way where all of our families' lives change? What if we wrote something that then in the back end, because we did ethical business, the back end percentages allow all of our kids to go to college? What happens then? You know, instead of the thing where Common Hymnal becomes the new number one, to be honest with you, that would be somewhat of a failure on our part. If we just became the new number one thing that everyone chased and tried to be like, that would be a failure of the mission. The mission isn't designed for us to be on top, even though the music, I'll put it up against anybody. That's not the mission. The mission is for everyone to be able to succeed in an egalitarian way and in a way where our success is based in more than metrics and accolades. It goes deeper than that. So
Yeah, because if you do that, then you're just I mean, then you're just the next Bethel, then you're just the next Hillsong. And then we're just waiting for a few years until your documentary comes out about, your Shiny Happy People season 5, right? Or
you
10.
said it. You
Yeah.
said it. I said
Yeah.
it.
You nailed it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Malcolm, you mentioned it, and we've talked before. When when you all set about creating this thing, whether it was, very intentional, kind of happened organically, you've talked about your past, growing up in apartheid South Africa. And then you also mentioned the murder of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. And when our initial first conversation, I grew up right over there. Like Ferguson's just a stone's throw away from where I grew up. I mean, completely different worlds. I mean, just a 20-30 minute drive and it's completely different worlds. But I had relayed to you that when that happened, I had a conversation with a cousin who's young black male at the time, and we were talking through those things, and that conversation just opened my eyes to things that I just, in my little very sheltered upbringing just didn't know were real. Um, and I'm curious how those things, growing up in what you grew up in, seeing those systems, walking away from those systems, and then this thing called Common Hymnal starts to form. And y'all's music is like it's theology and social justice, and it's just smushed together, right? Like it's almost like where does one begin and one end, right? Like it just melds together. And I'm
Mhm.
curious, was that intentional when you set out for this project, or was that just the natural occurrence that took place?
Suppose it's a little bit of both. I'm a risk taker. I thought America was a risk-taking country. That's the impression we have when you watch the success of America. I moved to America and learned that risks are more calculated. We I come from a more random country. So when we started, I've consulted in the music business. So when I first started, I had a record company that helped us do the back end. We sat down and we started talking about an idea that was not formed. And one of the execs said to me, "Let's draw up a P&L and let's fund you and let's blow this up." And I heard my mouth say, "Here's the problem. If I take your money, then you're going to want to return next year. And then I have to basically repeat what you do because that's what's on the psyche of the culture right now. And I don't really know fully what I want to do. And I know to find it out, I need time."
Mm.
And so I started a slow journey and slow and steady from day one. So yes, I'm a white guy who grew up absolutely disconnected from the majority Black culture in my country and started at age 23, really 24, and age 25, beginning to become a student of egregious racism. And I had 5 years of instigate. I did everything wrong. I've subsequently become a student of Steve Biko, who's the author, the father of Black consciousness in our country, and everything that I did was the opposite of Black consciousness. So I was royally offensive. I took all the initiative everywhere. I was super eager, but our country's real. So in America, everybody has to be nice the whole time and make sure you don't feel offended. So when I offended a young Black friend, they just told me. So you can learn quicker when when you know don't do this. Like, oh, okay, I'll try. And so I learned. I built something, and when we made our second record, it was banned by the government, and then my mail was opened every day, and then my phone was tapped, and I had a different kind of a life. But I always had the sense I was supposed to move to America and there was something I was supposed to do, but I didn't really have the clarity. So I did have a wealth of experience in my 20s, and then I had a good 20 years of, you know, learning American culture. Just took me a long time, took me 15 years before I realized, oh, this is different. This is very different. So when we started, yes, there's a sense of there's something that I did in my youth that I'm supposed to help instigate here. As I watch the similarities of the cultures, I learned the differences, but I'm also learning the similarities. Well, the similarities being white people like to be on top and feel very comfortable for being on top and don't think there's another way of looking at the world other than through their lens. And they don't ever have to put themselves in someone else's shoes. So I started processing that, and then it was a journey. I didn't. When we did that, when Philip came to that writing camp, we didn't give briefs. Like the world of Christian music is, we need to have a number 10 song that every church in America can sing, and boom, 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 boom. We haven't done that. We did that once, and that was the current record we were releasing because of an experience we had in an event in Seattle. And I remember that night thinking, whatever just happened tonight, let's do that, because I was in the audience and it moved me. And I just said, I don't know what this is, but whatever happened tonight, we got to capture that. And that was the only time I gave a brief, and I said, let's do something that's more worshipful. Well, this record it's not a church worship record, but for our point of view, it was more respectful. We were on a journey. So I've opened it up. We have songs that are on, climate change or sexual abuse or police brutality, or all these, we have 5 songs that have to do with financial reparations. Who has 5 songs on reparations? So we have a variety of stuff, and we got lots to do, but it wasn't steered it wasn't contrived.
Mm.
It's very experimental. It's been and then along the way, I mean, because I'm not wired to be a leader. I don't think I'm the instigator. I'm not like a leader. I'm a prophetically wired person. I'm a demolisher. I've worked in the music business, and I help people unplug things that are bad ideas. I'm good at unplugging. I've never been a builder. I've never identified as a builder. I'm not a destructive. I believe you remove obstacles so you can build, but other people build. I'm just the one who's unplugs things. But in this project, looking back, I realized, oh, we've built. But we've not built because of my genius. We've built because we've built an egalitarian ecosystem. And that is hard work. Authoritarianism is easy.
Hmm.
Just you build a hierarchy and you tell everybody what to do, and everybody's uncomfortable, and you just threaten them, and you have an easy life. Trying to aggregate a bunch of people's diverse feelings and tastes and opinions and music, and because we're not dealing with plastic or metal or iron ore or wood. We're dealing with human. You can only make music with human emotions and the human psyche. So we've I don't even know where I'm going with that, but we basically just it's an adventure, and what's happened along the way. What I've done is taken notes and thinking, oh, okay, this is working. So if you go read the website and you read the about page and you read all that stuff, that was not there in the beginning. Every sentence along the journey, we just kept adding to it, because like, oh, okay. We built a multi-ethnic thing, and then the next moment George Floyd was murdered, and then every white church in America became multi-ethnic on stage. Not in the leadership necessarily, not necessarily in the pews, but the decoration of the musical team with black bodies became an overnight phenomenon, but no systemic changes when it comes to the reality of what happens with different cultures in this country. So we had to think about that, because in some ways we were viewed as that.
Mm.
But no, 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 we're not doing that. This is not a we're not just saying, well, let's bring black people together and let's make spiritual music. No, we're actually talking about the root issues, and that's a journey. That's an experiment. I don't know if I nailed. I don't know if I helped. I don't know if I answered the question, but
No, you did. You
okay.
did. And but it leads beautifully into what I was going to ask next, because I'm curious. I guess maybe this might be directed towards Malcolm. Or maybe Philip. I'm not quite sure. Maybe both. I don't know. But I am curious at what that process is of, you've got this music that, like, it's described as calls to action, psalms of lament, anthems of hope, liturgies of resistance. Um, and I'm curious how you balance that line, because y'all do it really well. You do it really well of of kind of that talking about these hard-hitting things, these really, awful things, but in a way that like you're gonna listen to a song and you're not gonna walk away feeling like, oh, this sucks. Like there's hope in the song. And I'm curious how you navigate that tension of bringing both the challenge of the injustice and inspiring hope to the people listening to the song.
I'll say one sentence and let Philip answer, but I got one thing I can do to say get Phil going. That's by bringing good people together. That
Mm.
that doesn't come from instruction. So I'm an older guy in the music business. I've given a whole bunch of young people advice over the years. Every day I get emails. Have you got an hour for me? My friend told me I should speak to you. So I'm a traffic cop. I meet people every day of my life and I say, oh, well, let me introduce you to so and so. And then every now and again, I'm having a conversation. I think, uh, uh, maybe you should come with me. Maybe there's something over here that because I hear it's like, oh, it's a blend of empathy,
Mm.
intelligence, curiosity, and talent. And it gets so when we started, I was much more experimental and had people come that had no, I didn't even know if they were good writers. Along the way, as the skill level has increased, we've had to make adjustments because I can't put someone who's now becoming really good with someone who's really battling. But initially, the idea was is it's just quality. It's finding needles in the haystack and putting them together. So when Phil says I came to the event and everybody was better than me, it's not a competition. It's like there's a certain quality. It's really curiosity is at the number. Being a student is the top of the list, and then there has to be talent. But then there's also ethical some integrity, an understanding that making music just purely because of capitalistic reasons leads to a certain kind of music. And so I would take those people and introduce them to a record company. But the Phils of this world, I'll say, come, let's do it again.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and say, yeah, I totally agree. There is an element of what we do where not just an element, I would say at the core, the answer to your question is that's God's fault. It's God's fault that the songs find this way to speak truth to power at times, but to still maintain an essence of joy. I would say that's God's doing. I would say that, and I don't say that like how Christians say it when they don't want to give a real answer. I say it because time and time again, when the community gets in the studio and we get in these writing sessions and we get in song shares and we sit and we sing these songs and we play the stuff that's come together, we just have these moments of where we feel not to be a pun, but like we feel the gravitas, we feel the like that was God. Like, where did that song come from? This was powerful. Like, and it doesn't breed pride and arrogance among individuals. It really does push us all toward a sense of gratitude for the gift that the community is. So the truth of the matter is, we also field songs like if we are speaking on topical matters, we field and try to curate who's writing based off people's strengths. So unfortunately, in the world of songwriting, especially songwriting as a trade, it's, a lot of times based in things like popularity or success and metrics and numbers. Like, have you written a song that made, lots of money? Well, then we need to call you back in so that you can write the next song, right? But in our community, it's more so, what is it that you're really good at? My
Mm.
sister, Johnny May can sing the phone book and make you weep. So why would I go looking for somebody who has to push themselves to sing in a way that produces emotion when I can just call Johnny May? You see what I'm saying? If I want to experience the joy of Latin music, I can call my brother JC in a heartbeat. And John Carlos Velez will sit here and grab his guitar and start singing in Spanish, and you're gonna want to dance because that's the outflow of who JC is, right? If I want, soul and I want creativity and I want brilliance in a mind, I can go call James Peck and say, James, how do we get this song somewhere where it can be not only fun, but like radio ready? And he has the mind that can help us understand how to make a song radio ready without it being fake and you know what I'm saying? So every skill and every person that we call, if we want prophetic and fiery and we want percussive vocals and we want to make something, call Nikki Holman. Nikki, please come in here. Come in here real quick. Say whatever you gotta say. I bet you the mic gonna need it. You know what I'm saying? That's really where the fielding comes in, is a curation of talent, not just for the sake of curating talent so that they can be seen as talent, but we are trying to help you win in the gifts you actually have instead of trying to push you to become something else. If we know you can grow, we want to grow you, right? But and in any way you want to grow, if you come to the community and say, I want to grow in this, there's people who are willing to grow with you. But truly, if you need angry, that's part of what I do, right? Angry is part of what I do because that's just part of how I'm bent. The prophetic bent, me and Mal share that. Like, I can't help myself. It's just going to be part of who I am. So that's who you call for some things. If you want to get angry and clear, sometimes that's going to be where I'm going to get called in, right? And that, so without belaboring the point, that really is really where it boils down to. And I think at the end of the day, the ethos of the community is also joy is an act of resistance. Joy is a part of the global majority's response to oppression and has been consistently throughout history. So when we resist, we don't have to resist in a way where we are all melancholy and sad, because especially those of us from the majority that are not speaking out of a sense of guilt of things that we did or our ancestors did. That's not really where we don't have to apply guilt that we don't have to attract. What we can do is reach back into the part of us that says, in spite of what it feels like, in spite of what I'm dealing with, I still have joy. This joy that I have, the world can't give me, the world can't take it away. That can come out in the record too. So longer answer than I meant, but yeah.
No, don't apologize. Well, Malcolm and I don't remember how long ago it was that you and I talked over the phone. But this was part of the conversation. I was in the middle of reading John Lewis's biography, John Lewis, A Life, and I can't think of the guy's name who wrote it. But one of the things that struck me in the conversation that we were having, and also what I was reading, was the influence of the music of the civil rights movement, of how the music fueled a lot of the resistance. And even, there were reports like where these, white kids, college kids coming down to help out, they don't have any church background. They're from New England or whatever. And they got swept up in the music anyway. They're singing, We Shall Overcome and all of the stuff. You can see these, I guess you could call them sermons or whatever. And then singing would just break out. Right.
Yeah.
And everybody would get swept up into it. And I can remember the first time that I heard music from Common Hymnal. I don't remember how it came across, like why the algorithm did. Maybe it's just because of certain people that I follow, but it popped up and I started listening and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. This is that same soundtrack. It's the same thing. And all I can think of is, whether you want to call it God's timing or whatever phraseology you want to put to that, but it just seems like it's so appropriate. Like this thing happened here because it needed to happen here. And man, we need something to happen here because it needs to happen here. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Absolutely. I carry that conviction. I've been in music for 45 years, so I'm kind of jaded. I'm not going to listen to songs in my life for remedial activities because I'm in the business of generating them, and so it's hard for me to be entertained by a movie or music or something. Just as an individual, I'm a bit messed up because of a life in show business. But that being put aside, I just know that there's something about music that helps ideas infiltrate the human psyche. There's something about music that gives an opportunity to process challenge, to process hope. It's just something that goes. So in our movement, Nelson Mandela is a name. Most Americans know of him, but he would never have come out of jail if it wasn't for two things: boycotts and music. Music was a vital part. Every single thing we did. If you in the 70s and 80s were an artist that had a platform in South Africa. You wrote about things that were relevant to what we were going through. My project, there weren't many multi-ethnic versions. That was in Black culture, and there were like a handful where whites and Black people worked together, and I pioneered the one that came from the sort of like mainstream Christianity. Um, but I experienced it. Then I moved here, and I'm thinking that, and I've traveled to America sometimes 3 times a year. I've traveled a lot of my life, so I know America. My first visit to America, I stayed in the home of a Black family for 2 months, and so I was baptized into America through a Black lens. But it was still so much far better than what we had in apartheid. But I still imagine until I moved here, I still imagine that there were pockets all over America where justice infused music and protest was a vital part of the fabric of society. And I just thought, well, I haven't met them, and I'm a detective. I'm going to find them. So I'm searching. Then the internet comes. It's like I'm a better searcher, and I find the dearth. And so it fascinates me. I've spoken to lots of leaders. We have the chance, we have relationships with a number of leaders in social justice and Black liberation. And very few of them, they're interested, but when their default is not to incorporate music into the fabric of what they do. And so that's an uphill battle. That's our challenge. Um, we would love for, we're not looking for success in terms of pure capitalistic accomplishment. Many of us have been around that. I've been in show business. I know I've journeyed with people who've become embarrassingly rich and stuff, and I know the dynamics of all of that. We would love to become a vital part of the zeitgeist of the culture, where we got music that just helps people journey, but we still haven't managed to crack that code because there's not a hunger for that. And so our work is to seed the territory and just, when someone like you finds us, then you're going to tell someone else, and someone else is going to be helped. And so we're on the slow journey to get it out. But I don't know, especially in the season that we're living in now, I don't know how we navigate into the future outside of really skillful music helping us process and find a way into the future. An interesting thing about us is we've been prophesying. I'm going to say that I don't mean that in the goofy way, but we've been saying, if we don't attend to this, if we don't attend to this, if we don't all vote, if we don't do this, this is going to happen. And now this is happening. Now this year, there's a lot of people speaking up. Our work this year isn't so much to speak up. This year, our work is healing, love, because the warnings needed to happen a few years ago. It's too late to give the warnings now. Now we have to find our way out. We have to find our way into the future. We have to resolve. We have to comfort the disheartened, and we have to help embolden the courageous. And that's what really skillful, beautiful, artistic music can do. Help those that are grieving just feel slightly less alone, and help those that have got a gumption to have a whole lot more gumption and keep walking because this work is hard.
Mm. Phil, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was just thinking, when Mao says what happened in South Africa with Nelson Mandela would not have happened without boycotting music. I think of the correlation I have. I'm a product of the Black church. I come from the missionary Baptist, tradition, National Baptist Convention, a Black denomination for those who are not familiar with, a Black denomination that exists because of the racism of Southern Baptists. So that's where I come from, right? This very Black tradition. But I also came up interdenominational with a number of other different Black denominations like the Church of God in Christ, or the AME Church, AME Zion, Institutional, and others, Pentecostals and non-denominational, every grab bag there was. And when I think back of the tradition that I come from and the way that we experience God's power in music, it was never associated with infrastructure, and it was never associated with political allegiance. It was never associated with economic, economic power over someone else. Anytime our connection with the Spirit of God happened through music, it was about honoring the fact that God came to meet us in that moment and striving to live out of what God was choosing to do. And so the music of the civil rights movement Dr. Derwin Gray a few years ago had an article where he said, I don't know why we don't look at the civil rights movement as a revival, and I infer, I don't know why, other than the fact that it was led by Black people. Because you can, we talk about these great awakenings and all this other stuff, but I told my friend a couple years ago, I don't know how we got these great awakenings when no one woke up to racism. I don't get that. So it's hard for me to see it as awakening as we like it to be. When so much of the power of God is happening in culture, yet we're fine with institutional racism and fine with chattel slavery. That's really wild to me. But the civil rights movement, the revival power of the civil rights movement was hand in hand associated with these are songs that proclaim our freedom. And that goes all the way back to the history of institutionalized enslavement and how people sang in fields while being beat and being forced to labor in circumstances that they could not control. And their singing was not associated with, if we keep singing like this, it'll become a hit record and it'll become famous and we'll be rich enough to buy our way out of here. They're singing with this power that's associated with, as I sing, my joy increases. As I sing, my strength increases. As I sing, my ability to endure increases. And so that is where I see the music of the movement in this family really being consistently relevant and necessary. As Mal said, while the prophetic voice is still necessary, calling people to understand what's going to happen in the future is just kind of irrelevant right now in the scope of a world where things are just happening, right? We have detention centers on American soil now. We have $1 trillion being cut from people's healthcare. We have billions of dollars being made in sales to bomb kids, right? That's what's happening right now. Why are we writing songs about what's going to happen when we're living in crazy? And why would we write songs that are about, look how wonderful our lives are when people are literally suffering and dying? They're suffering and dying because they are trying to make it in a system that wants them to die, that doesn't like them, that doesn't honor them. For us, the legacy that we want to lean into is the legacy that says this music can be a representation of the fact that your spirit doesn't have to be broken in these times. And you don't have to be destitute and you don't have to give up. And God is not only good when we are in power, but God is good whether we are in power or whether we're under empire. In fact, the church that we are all downstream of came into existence under empire and without power and without institutional authority, but with authority that other people couldn't understand. The point that people could say, I don't know why, but we're about to beat these people. And it's still, I can tell by how they're talking that they have been with Jesus. That's what the music is meant to communicate. That there's a greater hope out there still, regardless of what happens out there. And in the midst of that hope, we are strong enough and have the right to resist. That's why my shirt says resistance is biblical. Like that's where I'm at with it. Like this is our legacy. This is what we come from. And also there's history attached to it. So yeah, I always lean back into that and I love the power of what happened in the civil rights movement because it was powerfully associated with music that allowed people to continue. You don't have recordings of Martin Luther King singing, but you got recordings of Mahalia Jackson singing. Mm-hmm. And you have recordings of the church as she sang. That to me is where the legacy is. It's not just in his words, it's in the words that helped him stay on stage.
Mm. Coming from the places that I grew up, how I grew up, all those kinds of experiences and whatnot. One of the realizations that I came to, I don't know how many years ago, was I felt very comfortable, and there's a point to this, and it has to do with what you just said. But I felt very comfortable in almost any space that I walked into. I do a lot of the work that we do here locally is social justice oriented. So a lot of spaces aren't led by people like me. They don't look like me. They don't love like me. They don't believe like me, and it's just this hodgepodge, group of people from all over the place. But I always felt like, I could walk into any space and I didn't feel anything but welcomed, right? Like I just walked in there and could get along with anybody. And I always thought it was because I was a nice guy. And I am, for the most part, I'm a nice guy, right? Like that's a thing. but I can't remember exactly why I realized this. It was just in the work that, Malcolm, maybe you can relate to this a little bit, but just in the work that you have to do of untangling all of the things that were handed to me as a white, straight Christian male in the United States. Um, I realized that the reason that I felt so comfortable in any space was because when I walked into that space, it was mine.
Yeah.
It was my space. I mean, this is my room, right? Like that was my default position. Not something that I consciously walked into the room, full of, when I worked with the Pride Center and it was full of queer people and I was like, this is my space. I didn't say that or you know what I mean? But just internally, every room I walk into is mine because that's what I was given.
Hmm.
And one of the things that's so powerful for me personally, I can't speak to anybody else, but one of the things that's so powerful about things like Common Hymnal, now there are other things in my life that do this too, but Common Hymnal is one of them. One of the things that is so just powerful, sorry, is how it has broadened and deepened my understanding of the divine and then also of humanity and helped me see just how small my understanding of those things were before.
Hmm.
And so like I can't read scripture now. I mean, I don't mean this, you use the word contrived, so this isn't performative or anything, but it's hard for me to read it like I read it before.
Yeah.
Like I'll never be able to put myself in the shoes of a brown-skinned homeless preacher, right? Under occupation. I'll never do that. But I can never go back to reading it from the position of power that I just took for granted before. Does that make sense? And to me, there's so much power in your music because it's sung from the position that it's sung from.
Yes.
And I can't hear Hillsong anymore. I mean, despite all of the other problems, but that type of, I can't listen to it. Like it grates on my nerves simply because it's coming from this place of, Sean Foyt and from the Capitol steps rather than from the streets. Does that make sense? And that just so resonates with me.
That's because we're an African outfit. I
Mm.
say that as the white African, and I don't say that in a stupid white way, like some white person who's suddenly deciding I'm Africa's, you know, representative. But I grew up in a country where we had 11 languages. Very few people speak all 11 languages. So pretty much wherever you go, you kind of don't really know always what's going on if you live the real life in the real country. So you learn the skill of body language. You pick up enough words, you can get by in a conversation and know like 20% of what's happening and have the time of your life. I come to America and interact with white people, and I'll use idioms that are not American idioms, much of a muchness. I can list them all. I can see the moment I say one of my funny phrases that are not in the culture, I can see people's eyes glaze over because I lose them. Because the skill of having to put yourself in someone else's shoe is not built into the fabric of the culture. And and unfortunately or fortunately, that is the story of Christianity. Jesus had to put on our shoes. This and every other culture in the world where white people predominate has to learn to put on other people's shoes or code switch, which is the negative version of it. But they have to learn the skill of interpreting everything that's happening through someone else's viewpoint just to survive. White people generally don't have to do that, as you've said it in a different way, better way. So the skill of listening, of that's why we use the word egalitarian. It's just how do you build a culture where there's people have different journeys and you just have to learn the skill of and then you can do that in the music too for the most part. White people in America say, well, this is racist, you people are racist, black people and you're dividing, it's divisive. And it's like, no, 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 no. Hold on, let's talk about Jesus. Let's talk about putting on someone else's shoes. It is possible. There are ways, there are routes for a secluded, sheltered white person who thinks that way to actually begin a journey. And it usually begins with a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that's what happened. I that 21-day fast that I referenced, it was 350 white people. There were two black people in our church. And but what did I do the next week? I walked the streets of Durban and then I rode around our country, and any black person that would talk to me, I'd talk to. And I offended all of them, but I was hungry. And I've learned. See what I mean? As I say in America, I know more about black hair than any white person should ever know because I've spent time in black culture. I learned as a kid that once I started spending time in black homes, I realized that for about a few weeks, wherever I went, people were telling stories about dog bites. And I remember driving home one night and thinking, that's really strange. It clicked. Our dogs are racist. Accepting that we don't have to go to black neighborhoods because of the way the country was designed, but black people have to come into our neighborhoods and they get bitten by our dogs. Fortunately, I had a bad dog bite when I was a teenager, so I quickly learned I could tell my dog bite story and I was in. I could put myself on these people's shoes, and whenever they were talking about their experiences with dogs, I said, "Me, I was a newspaper deliverer, and this dog, I went in this house, and blah 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 blah," and everybody was thrilled, and we made a connection.
Yeah.
Our hope, is that these subjects, people like some of our songs, and then they suddenly hear a song of ours, and they get very upset. You woke, and it's like, no, 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 no. This is about compassion. This is about learning. There's a reason that Jesus called his followers students. Let's let's be learners. It's fun to learn, yeah, and let's learn from each other. So I can tell you this, that I've spent an inordinate amount of years in my life as one of the only white people in a sea of blackdom, and it's the great joy of my life. Am I funky? Do I have braids? Am I the white person who should connect with black people? Absolutely not. And now I'm old and I'm always in these rooms with these hip black kids, and it's like, oh my goodness, this is uncomfortable for me. But it's also unbelievably exhilarating because the innovationness and the genius of that, what a privilege. Most black people have to be in rooms of predominantly white people, and we're quite boring. Once you've experienced it the other way around, it's not much fun in it. Once you've experienced the exhilaration of the innovativeness of BIPOC culture, it's like, oh my goodness, these poor people.
What, you don't like our mayonnaise and tasteless chicken?
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Y'all gonna get me in trouble. Jesus. Oh.
But we have that in if that comes out, when you said what you said, that's moving to us. That we sit here and think, okay, we think we can need to carry on, no matter how hard it is. Keep. If that's the response, that's beautiful. But that comes from being students and listening and learning.
Mm.
This is a lovely discussion, by the way. This feels very comfortable and good. We could have said all radical things, and we're talking about really real hard things that are kind of radical.
Mm. Well, Phillip, let me ask you, as you, I mean, Mal, you had a lot to say right there. I mean, we go a million different ways, you know what I mean? But I'm curious, Phillip, from your perspective, just I guess I'm curious your thoughts on what we were just saying, especially as somebody that's actually doing the singing, that's doing the writing, that's doing the creating. I'm just curious your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'll say this from two angles. So one, as a black person who has spent the last nearly 20 years in intentionally multi-ethnic spaces and multicultural spaces, and leaned into what the difference between those two are. Because multi-ethnic is just a matter of stats. Multicultural is a matter of being able to engage in the differences in how other people see the world. And that is a journey that I've been on, right? I had to learn in multiculturalism what it meant to bring the entirety of my culture with me, because my entrance into multiculturalism was in multi-ethnic spaces where I was learning what parts of my culture to bring and what parts not to bring. I come from a Creole family on my dad's side. And so there's a lot of colorism in that community. There's a lot of most of my family on my dad's side is light skin, wavy hair. You know what I'm saying? My son, my wife is white and Puerto Rican. My son reflects a lot of my Creole family, and I jokingly call my son Prince Navi. That's his nickname. So if you know the Princess and the Frog, you know, I'll jokingly call my son, "Come here, Prince Navi." You know, and so there's always been in the history of my people, just even the way it comes down into the culture of the New Yorkers I was raised by, um, this this much blackness is acceptable on this front, and this much blackness is acceptable on this front, and a lot of navigating and learning rooms based off how much you're going to bring of parts of who we are to the space, and it being associated with what is acceptable and what is professional and what is respectful and what is good and right. And so it took a long time for me to realize how much I had allowed um, my respect for other people's standards to outweigh my own representation in the spaces that I was in. That took a while. And so I had to learn in my journey as a worship leader how to lead worship in rooms full of white people, because I had started playing drums in rooms full of black people and singing in choirs in rooms full of black people where so much doesn't have to be explained. And then I went to these white churches where everybody had lyrics on the screens, because if you don't put the lyrics on screens, how can we learn them? Because they're not dialogical in their culture. So we don't learn by audio. We learn by looking. We learn by reading. And I learned, oh, in my space, we like to worship God with our soul and our feelings. And in their spaces, what mainstream evangelicalism, speaking in broad strokes, they like to worship God with their mind and their understanding. And the difference is when there is a power dynamic involved that you don't always understand, the power dynamic says, hey, the people who worship God with their mind get to determine how much of the soul is acceptable. And so that was a journey. That was decades. It's been decades of spending the first 10, you know, and in restraint in a lot of ways, while still being myself, while never leaving my community, while never forgetting I was black, none of that stuff. A lot of my contemporaries have that issue. I don't have that issue. I didn't forget I was black. I didn't code switch my way out of losing. I didn't lose who I was. It's just I was navigating so much, and going from a space of navigating to going to a space of I'm grown now. We can't do this anymore. You're never going to grow if I don't be me all the way. Has been a journey. And that to me is what I bring to the common hymnal space. And that is what is expected of everyone who comes in. We're not asking white people who come into the common hymnal space to pretend to be black, Asian, Latino, whatever. Why would we ask you to do that? Please bring all of the raisins in your potato salad. It is what it is. I'm not asking, and I'm being silly when I say it, but seriously, please bring your experience. Why? Because your experience of what it means to come out of that colonized mindset that says, I got to be in charge all the time, and to spend time with us and to truly become incarnate to the community you're in, that experience is valid, and we need you to write about it. We need you to write about it. We need you to sing about it. We need people to see through your life that it's possible. Not so you can be an evangelist to white culture that can suddenly be heralded as the translator for all of our blackisms, but so that you can be a voice of this is what happens when we do what Jesus did and lay things down, right? That is necessary. It's valid. It's helpful. And so on that front, I see such a beauty in what you were sharing, Joe. Like, it's such a beauty in what Mal experienced. That's what makes Mal different for a lot of people, is that Malcolm, you know, I've learned in my love and relationship with white people enough that when you meet white people who are awake to the reality of social injustice, they run into a situation for the rest of their lives where they are the white people who cannot unsee what they've seen. And yet they are in rooms with white people who don't see what they see. And they have to navigate that constantly navigating, being in a space where people might just MAGA it up, you know, in a room right in front of you, and they think you're one of them, and they don't know no better, right? The difference with me is that people, I've been in rooms every time where when I walk in, people are going, how much of us is he like? How much can we understand of him? And no matter what I sound like, and no matter what I sing like, this doesn't go anywhere. So there's always a filter in how I'm dealt with, because that's the virtue of the reality of the society I live in. On the other end, I would say, man, isn't that there shouldn't be anything special about white people coming into reality, right? shouldn't be anything special or heralded or whatever. And the problem again with our society is because there is a disproportionate amount. And particularly, I have to speak in language of white and black because that is the cardinal sin of our culture. That is the race issue. I am fully convinced, as a theologian, as a person with a Bible degree, as a person who has spent time in church, who's a hard Orthodox guy in a lot of ways, I am convinced culture and race are the biggest factors in people's theology and their ecclesiology and the way that they see the world from a spiritual lens. Why? Because the lens that allows you to navigate in the world outside of the church is the way you read your Bible. It's the way you read, it's the way you deal with your kids, it's the way you deal with your job. That is a bigger lens than the lens that you spend in 1.5 to 2 hours on Sunday. It's just the reality, right? So that has to be the lens that we speak of when we're talking about these things. That being said, with that aside, it shouldn't be it shouldn't be a miracle that white people come into an awareness of the reality of what this world is. But it's a miracle because the stronghold of racism is really that strong. And because the stronghold of systemic injustice is really that strong, white supremacy doesn't only list itself, it doesn't only enlist the help of white people. White supremacy needs black people who code switch voluntarily. White supremacy needs systems that allow white to be normal. White supremacy needs supermarkets to continue to have hair care products and ethnic care products, right? It needs that. It needs international food and American food, even though the culture is supposed to be, everybody's supposed to be able to come here in the first place. It needs that to sustain itself. It needs narratives. And so the miracle of breaking a lie narrative that has become the foundation of who you are and how you live your life, that's a beautiful miracle. But the hope and prayer is that it won't be a miracle forever, that it would become the standard. The reason I married my white Puerto Rican wife is because I have never had to question who I am with her. It's because she was raised as one of two white families in a church with mostly Black, Hispanic, Caribbean, Latino people. And she grew up in the Bronx, New York, in not the rich part. And so she was just, it wasn't them running things. It was her as one in a sea of everybody else. She saw herself not as the dominance in the culture, but as a part of the culture that she sees the world as a space she has to navigate, right? But even in her, I had to come awake to, oh, this place is set up for me to be the default. This place is set up for people to trust me more than they trust other people. I'll say this and I'll stop. I always tell people I have 3 children. My sister has 3 children. My wife's stories in the hospital and delivery are very different than my sister's, right? And that's because of the world we live in. Because my wife, when she screamed out in pain and contraction, she's believed instantaneously. Because the culture I'm in says, protect white women. They can't be hurt. But when my sister was in pain, she can handle it because the culture told them Black women can handle more pain. If we can acknowledge realities, then people coming to awareness of the truth doesn't become a spectacle. It just becomes welcome in now. You can really be family.
Mm,
Bravo.
yes, indeed. I wish we had another hour because I would dive into so much of that. That might be a conversation for later. But I want to honor your time. One final question, and then I'll let you both go. As we kind of move forward, and I think you both beautifully talked about how the role that you see yourselves in, Common Hymnal, playing in this season of of encouraging those that are feeling weak, and then doing the same for those that feel strong, but like, no, you need more of it. We need more of that. As we continue to navigate, like we're less than a year into this insanity. I mean, it's not even 12 months yet. So we've still got 3 years of this stuff. What are your for Common Hymnal, for the church, for worship music? And I know that's a big, broad, that's a huge umbrella. But I'm just curious, what are your hopes for the future as you're looking ahead as Common Hymnal?
Go for it, Philip.
I hmm, I hope that people will learn what God sounds like. and they'll stop listening to things that say they are the voice of God or say that they speak on behalf of God that do not. That is my genuine hope. My genuine hope is that the Jesus that disrupts would be the Jesus that we sing about. In that, I genuinely hope and pray for the exposure of wickedness on high levels. I genuinely hope and pray for the exposure of colonization in the worship movement. I hope for the exposure and the uncovering of wickedness that's done on a business level that prevents the truth of the gospel and the truth of a God who gives dignity to all people from coming forth and becoming mainstream. I hope for that. And I don't hope for it so that people's faith can be crushed and some people's worlds can be blown apart. But I just believe that evil is unsustainable. I genuinely believe that. I believe that if God is good, evil is unsustainable. And you can only do so much evil in the name of God and get away with it. And there are a lot of people who have the opportunity and the platform to speak the truth of God into the scenarios that we are dealing with on a regular basis, who are not doing it because it is more profitable for them to not do so. And I hope that those people lose platform. I hope that they lose power. I don't have to name names because it's unnecessary and there's too many of them. But that's the truth. But in that also, I hope that regardless of upstreaming capability and regardless of economic bandwidth and regardless of algorithmic, intuition and what allows things to come to the top of the screen and go to the bottom of the screen, I hope that we can come back to a place like what we experienced in the civil rights movement, where the voice of the movement is too loud and cannot be drowned out, where the voice of the voiceless becomes too loud. And that being both the blood crying out from the ground is too loud to ignore, and that the joy of the people who will not be squashed out is too loud to ignore. That's what I genuinely hope for. I hope that we will see change among writers and worship leaders and people, particularly speaking in the church space, of color and Black folks. I hope that we see an influx of those people waking up to the reality that God has never asked them to be less of themselves and less of the people that he created them to be in order to be effective in the world. And so we see significant uprising in people owning their own narratives and communities owning their own stories, and being welcome to that. And I also hope that for those who choose to remain asleep to injustice, and not just apathetic, but asleep, ignorant, unaware, blissfully so, that God continues to do what God does best, which is open eyes and show you where you are out of step and show you where what you've chosen to platform and what you've chosen to allow on a systemic level is wrong, and that they would be convicted, not just in a way of anger, but convicted in a sense of redirected towards divesting from that which is making the world worse. Ultimately, again, evil is unsustainable. People who are winning at the top level, on the financial level, when we're watching things like building a Tesla only, tunnel in Nashville, this is unsustainable foolishness, right? The amount of money that these people have, the ultra rich of our world, it's unsustainable levels of money. You have to take too much from the world to do it. What we've seen in the increase of AI, where a city in Memphis that has 4 times the rate of cancer is being used as a hub for Grok right now. And every time somebody says, Grok, is this true? Because they won't do the work of research, they're helping a community die in Memphis. That's unsustainable. It's foolishness. So my hope is that people come to realize their part in what is contributing positively or negatively to the upkeep of society and allowing people to grow. And I want our kids to see something better than what we've given them. And so that's really what I'm hoping, and that's what I'm hoping happens in the space of worship music, that it would be exaltation of a real God. Because the real God is not cool with this stuff. The real God is not asleep to injustice. The real God is not dead to the cries of people. The real God does not need institutional power and laws from human hands and financial backing and super PACs to accomplish will. That's not what the real God lives like. So that's my hope. People come to hear the voice of the real God through God's people, and that Common Hymnal's place in that would be the platforming of people to be themselves, and that God would bless people to see success, even financial success, restorative justice, restorative economic success through what we're doing, so that people have even more means to accomplish good in the world. That's what I was saying.
Once again, bravo.
Yeah. Yes and amen. Malcolm, did you want to add anything to that?
I don't know. I don't think I can. I could stutter. I can stumble. I can
I feel
embarrass
that.
myself.
I feel that. Well, Phillip, Malcolm, thank you both so much for all of your time. Thank you for your joy. Thank you for the work that you're doing and the way that you see the world and how you're inviting us into better places. So just, I can't speak for everybody, but just for me, I just so appreciate you both. Appreciate what you all are doing. It's made a difference in my reconstruction of things. And so personally, thank you. But on behalf of everybody else, thank you for this time together and for what you do.
Thank you. And I said this before, but thank you. The way you've incorporated our music and some of the stuff that you're posting, which is so articulate and strong, is just a gift to us because it just makes us feel, okay, we're not wasting our time because we want the music to underlay the narrative. And so thank you for that. We just hope that more people will do that because that just makes our work feel, meaningful. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much. It's truly a joy to be able to impact people, and this has been a long journey. I've heard the conversations that we're having in public right now in 2019 and earlier, and there are things that I won't get into them, but there are things that Malcolm has said for years and years and years that we're watching people say, that people are just coming to see. And when you have as you would know as a pastor, when you are walking in prophetic work, you're often working in the future. And working in the future means you have to wait for the future to show up to validate what you said, right? It looks weird building an ark. It ain't no rain out, right? So you just sitting here, it's like, where's all this wood? Why you got a hammer? Why you got nails? Like, look, bro, you'll see. Like, I know I look crazy. You know what I mean? Like, and so Joe, I just want to tell you, man, you are a part of the fruit of what we do. And it's an appreciated thing, beyond words, to know that this hymnal, this library that we've been building has been reaching people that we could never have dreamed to reach, including yourself, that we can't advertise enough to reach. You and others like you, and those who are taking the time to listen to this, you are a fruit of what it is that we're trying to do. Not so that we can be bigger, but so people can see things different. So your choice to see different, it means the world. Thank you, bro.
Well, that's awesome. I love that. I'll say thank you, and we'll just move along. I really appreciate it. So if you're following along, go check the show notes because we're going to have all of the stuff in there. We didn't even get to your new song that dropped, Gravitas. I had that listed, and then so my apologies, but the link will be in there for people to go listen to it, to go stream it, or go download it. Thank you both again so much for your time. This was such a wonderful conversation. I literally wish we had another hour, but that's just me. Thanks for following along, everybody. I hope that wherever you find yourself today, that you have the exact day that you need. Now get out of here. Go love on some people.